Okay.
Yeah.
Date 10th June 2024 and time is this. So we have studied something about the components. What do you mean by component? How do you write the components? Selector, template and everything. And we didn't talk about one thing, is nothing but this at component guy. What is this at component? So that thing is called as decorator. It's a TypeScript concept. It is doing or it is creating some code for you, which means that if you want to map this class with this selector, that code needs to be generated somewhere. The standalone true, to make this component standalone, or forget about the standalone, this template. So assigning this TS class into this template, or vice versa, template to this TypeScript class, there is some binding code. And Angular thinks that that code shouldn't be written by you. So that Angular have used one of the TypeScript concept called as decorators. So behind the decorators, we can generate the code, right? Behind the decorator, we can generate the code. And if you see here something like this, at first, function first, console.log first, factory evaluated, and can you see it is returning a function which is having target, any, property, key, string, descriptor, and this thing. And the second, if you see, and if you see this decorator first and second, they have applied over the class. Now let's try. If you try it, okay, see the JS code that has been generated, .js code, where decorate first, second, something has been done, and on the class method, you have applied at first and at child. If you see at first and at child applied on this method, and for this it is generating some output. Okay, it is generating some output. So if you run this thing, click on the run, can you see here the factory evaluated in the first. So this have been automatically executed, right? Then here if you see factory evaluated, second call and the first call, can you see these functions, second call and the first call? So which means that when you attach at this thing, at first and at second, these functions are getting called. These functions are getting called. These functions are getting called automatically, which means that the code you want to write for mapping something, or for the selector and this thing, that has to be written inside these functions, and Angular people have written that code for you. And that's why this automatically magically gets mapped when you write this thing, magically this template gets loaded for you. Yes or no?
Yeah.
How come that is happening? Where is that code? In this thing, that code is not available, and that code is getting created at the compile time. Can you see here? So this is the JS file. This is the JS file that has been created from this compilation, right? And this code is getting created somewhere, and that code is nothing but what? Written behind the implementation of the at component. So this thing is absolutely important to make your TypeScript class component. Now what is that code? Let's not write that. Even let's not create our, we can create our own decorators also, but let's not invest time into that. Presently you don't need it. Presently you don't need to create your own decorator, but you need to understand the existing decorators. You got it. What do you mean by decorators? Hello?
Yeah.
It will generate some code for you internally.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what is that method? I mean,
Which method?
you showed another tab. Yeah, TypeScript.
So this is simple. Any name, you can give any name over here. Method name, TypeScript class method name. So over that method, they have attached these two annotations, at first and at second. So inside this method, something will happen. If you run the code, see what is going to happen. First, factory evaluated means this thing is getting called automatically. Then this thing,
Because of this at the rate
they, because of these things, internally these functions are getting called. And in Angular, you just see these things at first and at second, correct? But code behind that is available in the dependencies. In the dependencies, that code is available. They have written already.
Okay.
Correct?
Yeah.
Fine. So if you see here on the other day,
So, Aniruddha, what is difference between that at the rate per second? It invokes some functions, right?
yeah, internally
Yeah. And then the third line method.
method. So this
So
is,
without at the rate, what is the difference when calling a function with at the rate and without at the
see now. So this is a class method. You create the object const
rate? Mm-hmm.
const a is equals to new example class and a dot method you call it, right? But whenever you execute this method, behind the scene something will happen, or even before at first and at second. So inside this method, some piece of code would be getting executed like this, like this. So factory evaluated. This must not be there. Or you can say first called, second called. So this function is getting invoked automatically. The first function is returning another function, second function is returning another function, and those functions are playing role in implementing your code. You can write any code over here, whatever you want to write. So and that code would be added or executed before the execution of this method, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to do something like database connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
Before execution this, you need to do the DB connectivity. But every time you don't need to write the DB connectivity, so you will create a decorator at connect and you'll attach before this method. So whenever you call this method, right,
Mm-hmm.
that code would be executed first and then this method would be executed.
Okay. So method we can say it is a reserve.
It is what?
Reserved. I mean,
This name you're saying?
yeah.
So this can be anything. My method.
Okay.
This can be any name. This is the class method. This is the simple
Okay.
TypeScript class. This can be anything.
Okay.
Similarly,
Mm-hmm.
your component name can be anything. In the same
Mm-hmm.
fashion, that would be anything.
Yeah. So can we say like component is nothing but a class?
Yeah, component is a class.
Yeah.
We have seen that in the definition, a TypeScript class. Can you see? Every component must have a TypeScript class. They already have stated over here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a TypeScript class with HTML template and the CSS selector.
Yeah. Right.
But inside this, this thing is going to generate some code for you. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. Now, on the other day, let's create a new folder, day 50. cd web dev angular, cd desktop, web dev angular, cd day 50, nvm use 18, and I can say ng new. If you remember here, we have created something to-do list, and this to-do list is producing same kind of li. If you see here in the to-do list.html, can you see this is all the time producing same li, and that is nothing but what? Mobile recharge, mobile recharge, mobile recharge. Now I want to send the data. That is one thing I want to do, and I wanted to send the data, and what I need to do, and I need to style something, right? So in short, I would like to cover selectors, styling, and accepting the data. These three things I wanted to cover: selector, styling, accepting the data as a properties. First, we will accept the data as a property. Okay, let's create a new project. ng new component features, comp features, css, no, it is generating, just a minute. Yeah, it has been created. Index.html, app root, and I want to create my new component. So here I can say bar dot component dot ts. Okay, export class bar. This is a bad idea. I'm in the beginning, I'm telling you, creating like this is a bad idea.
Yeah. That's the question because we need to add the references everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. Not needed. You are in Angular 18. That is the older strategy of adding the references. That's what the meaning of the standalone is. Add component. So selector. So I'm typing this code in front of you just to show you, right? App bar, just to show you how things are going to work. Standalone true. Just keep aside this standalone true, and here template. So people get confused and they think that you need to use the Angular CLI. Absolutely not needed. I just wanted to show you that part. Angular CLI is a utility. You can create this all together. This is a TypeScript, and TypeScript is not saying that you shouldn't use like that. So here I have h1, and here I have h1, and here I have one variable. Here I have one variable, say time or dt, date time, is equals to 2020 or new date. Okay, and I want to show this date over here. I want to show this dt parameter over here. Okay,
Yeah.
so there is one kind of data binding over here, interpolation. Just write double brackets and then write dt over here. Let's add, so section, we can add bootstrap also, no problem. And then I can say app bar, and let's import app bar component. We have exported the bar component, sorry, bar component. Then cd component feature npm run. What happened? Npm start, npm start localhost 4200. You can see the date. Here you can see the date. So you don't need CLI, but if you use I highly recommend to use what? CLI. But just wanted to clear the confusion. Okay, just delete unwanted files first. These are the wanted files, but presently we don't need it. You'll get to know what is the meaning of them. Spec file, you can delete it. So Angular is nothing, some magic. I just wanted to show you that it's a plain TypeScript, and the framework you have configured properly, you can use it. Now, can you see here what we have used? This double bracket is called as interpolation. What it is called as?
Interpolation.
Interpolation. I want to assign that value, or I want to use that value into my template. If you want to use this dt into the template, you can use this thing. Even you can say split. You can call JavaScript functions also split by means of this t and use the zeroth thing. If you go over here, dt.ok to string dot split. Can you see, you can see only a few things over here, date and time. We have removed unwanted things. Okay, so what I wanted to show you, inside HTML you can access the JavaScript like this. Inside HTML you can access JavaScript in a interpolation symbol. Okay, so this is one thing. Now I wanted to this component, what I want to do, I want to get the data from the user. Like here I have written app component HTML, and here I will say dt is equals to I will set the data 2020 01 01. I will set the data 2020 01 01, and that data I wanted to show here. I will keep this guy as it is, and I will create one more h1, and we can say std standard date. To the standard date we can assign this, or we can keep the dt also, and to that dt we can attach at input. The way you have button tag, to the button tag we have button tag we have type. In the same fashion we can have input, right? And to the input we can assign something like this. See, now here you can get 2021 01 01. Now if you don't pass it anything, automatically it will take Monday. It will identify that if you have passed something, let's assign that to the dt. If you have don't pass it anything from here, you can make it this default value. You can create this default value. So if you can set dt is equals to 2020 01 01 hyphen 01. So you created the property. You created what? The property. Now if you see
Which property are you
dt, what is the dt? So app bar is your own component,
right?
you created app bar as your own component.
Mm-hmm.
Now I wanted to create my own custom property, the way we have input tag, and can you see type is a property, value is a property.
Mm-hmm.
Type is a property, value is a property. Yes or no?
Yeah.
Type is a property and value is a property. Similarly,
Right.
this is my own element app bar,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I want to
Right.
create my own property, correct?
Yeah.
That is the dt.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I create the app bar, the dt should come. So I can pass the string. Just make sure that you will add the quotes so that it will become a string. Now here what it is saying, if you see, it is saying that the dt is of type date. I will not accept it. So you can say is of type date, or it's of type string. Now you can see 2021 like this. So you can remove this quotes now and see here 2020 01 01.
Mm-hmm.
Getting my point?
So that at the rate input you mentioned.
To the dt field.
So that statement will look into the look for the input.
Input, correct. Just a minute, I will write in this way. So this dt is nothing but this dt.
Mm-hmm.
This is of type either date or string. So from here I either will pass string or I will pass the date object, whatever.
So for multiple, suppose like dt, you created multiple variables.
Now where are the multiple variables? This is only one variable.
No. If you want.
These are the two types. In TypeScript we can assign, if you remember, we have seen the value types.
Yeah.
We have seen the union types. This thing is called as a union type in TypeScript.
Right. I'm asking about just like a DT
Uh-huh.
is a variable, and there is another variable for string, for example,
Okay.
anything, number, string.
Mm-hmm.
And suppose you want to send some value, then again you have to write the
Correct. Input. So here you can say app bar dt now st is equals to abc. And
So
now,
this is the syntax, right?
correct. Which syntax?
Like at the rate input and then the
Correct.
variable name, and also you have to mention in your component.
Correct. So do not forget this thing, input type button. What is the type? It's property. What is the value? Property of the input. Type is the property of the input. Value is the property of the input. Similarly, dt is the property of the app bar. St is also another property of the app bar.
Right.
And here we can say st. Here you see abc is getting printed over there.
So we are customizing our own component, and we are customizing its type as well.
Correct.
User defined.
Yeah. Customizing your own element, you can say, or the component. And if you can create your own component or element, you can create your own properties also. Correct? Now bar is a child of app component. Yes or no?
Right.
Bar
App component is the
root component, and inside that you have written this. Is this clear to you, whatever I have typed so far?
Yes. Yes, I got it.
Okay. Now app component can you see, it is having a title, and as bar component is a child, right? So presently this is okay, but in Angular this is creating your own properties by means of at input, something like this, and using them in your project or in your other components. So if you want to bind the properties, you created your own properties dt and st, and you want to bind it with the variables, like title variable I have, and dt is equals to new date, or dt is equals to start. This is one of the variable in my app component, new date. Here we can say 2020 05 05 start date. Now to this dt I want to assign that start date. So if you try to write, okay, just remove it here and just try to write the variable name start date, and you go here, and can you see, you can see the start date over here as it is, but I want a value of the start date. So start date is my variable over here, start date, and its value is this date. So either you can write the binding like this, and here it will see start date. Okay, got it. So this will not work over here, interpolation. So here I have a variable start date, and that I want to bind with this. So Angular gives you one syntax, property binding, rectangular brackets, property bind this property with this dt variable, bind this property with this dt variable. What is happening? Start date. Just a minute. dt date or string. We created the new date object. Okay, just try to remove this thing. Yeah, that was the problem of that guy. So here I can say 2020. Here if you can see the 2020 5th May and 5th day. Can you see it's the 5th May and the 5th day. So this is coming correctly, no problem. But if you see here, the rectangular brackets are important. What is important? These rectangular brackets. Property binding. The variable of the app component start date is bound with the property dt. Similarly, we can bind this title also. So if you try to write title, try to write title, can you see it will show you the title. But if you write this property binding, it will show you COMP FEAT, right? Property binding. Now this property binding can be used anywhere. So here you can say type. This is the type, built-in property binding, and here you can pass the variable button. Can you see input type? Okay. So you have passed the string over here. You can write this string in one of the variable also. That is also okay. Right. Similarly, you can apply the styles. So I have a div, and here I can say style, style style, and here stobj. I can create the stobj. So stobj is equals to border one px solid red, and here we can say hello. You can see hello. Property binding. Even you can write like this also. If you wanna work with the specific style, say background color, and if any variable red, can you see it is showing the red so particular style background color you have bound. Here you have passed whole object stobj, which would be having any keys, and whatever style keys are matching, that would be applied over here. All these things are the examples of property binding. Hello?
Yeah. So on line number 4, if you remove the bracket,
See, it's a button, it's a text box. Because if you write anything over here, automatically it shows you the text box by default, which means that it is writing anything, it is considering anything. And this is the string value. Double quotes are the syntax of HTML. Inside that, we are passing this string with the brackets. That is the syntax of the property binding. So here we created the custom properties. Here I have shown you these are the built-in elements. Internally these things are happening. Whatever you have written over here, same things are happening internally at input. Any question?
Yeah, these are so many new things.
Let me push this code. Angular property binding.
So that interpolation you explained, so what we called it, I mean, just like the property binding.
String interpolation. Name itself is string interpolation. So here you can use, okay, just try to use the interpolation here. dt dt is a date object, and st do the property binding. Try to use it. See, this will work over here. But if you try to use this over here, so when you talk about these things, if you talk about these things, property binding is a more convenient approach over here, because that binding we don't use for the objects. This is the object. dt is the object, right? Even here, this stobj is the object. So it shouldn't be used. This interpolation shouldn't be used with the objects, and that should be used with the strings only. That should be used with what? Strings only. That should be used with what?
Strings.
Strings only. It will work, but this is the bad approach. It should be used only with strings. Is that clear?
A bit confused, but I need to read about it. I mean, string interpolation will assign the value, right?
Correct. But that is not, it's a kind of binding.
So that is data binding.
Yeah, whatever we have seen, that all these are the data binding. Whenever you bind these variables with the template, that is the data binding.
And when you use dt with the square brackets, that is property binding.
That is a property binding. It's a part of data binding.
Part of data binding. Okay. So in that case, where you define start date?
here in this component.
So internally, it will again take the data binding, right? I mean, for in case of property binding, ultimately, the line number 3.
This one you are saying?
Line number 3.
Uh-huh.
So this is property binding. Ultimately, it is taking the value of start date.
Yeah, it's taking this value start date.
So again, it is binding the data.
Correct. So this variable getting bound with the property of the app bar. That's why it's a property binding.
Okay. This is the concept of Angular.
Yes. Pure Angular.
Okay. That's why I mean, while learning JS, this data binding and property binding was not there.
Where?
While learning
JS.
JS,
Yeah. It's
it is
not the
pure.
JS concept.
Yeah,
It is the pure Angular.
Mhm. I need to revise this. This is
So I'm going very slow. Otherwise, in one session, I covered property binding, data binding, event binding, interpolation.
event binding is also there.
Yeah, event binding is also there. Custom event binding is also there.
Okay.
So this is the custom property binding. We created our own property. In the
Mhm.
same way, we can have the custom events also.
Okay.
Now, new things are added, signals. The
Mhm.
Angular, new things are added, signals.
Okay.
With that also we can do. But you need to know at input at out. Shall we conclude? We'll meet tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, please revise the things.
Yeah.
We need
Under the what should be the sequence, like you created your our own component.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yes.
And you are referring it into the app component.
Correct.
That should be the flow.
You can create this thing anywhere.
Yeah.
Flow
Yeah.
always should start from your app component.html. Whatever is there in app component.html, selection, then app bar, right? If you want to use the app bar over here, app bar should be present first, right?
Right.
If you want to use app bar over here, it should be available first. So you can create the app bar component. Otherwise, for the input div, you don't need to create anything. Straight away, you can write it.
Yeah. But also here, what to say? Okay. I mean, you define variable in the TS file of the app component as well as in the user defined bar component.
Yes.
And both are used in the app component.html.
Correct. and push the code.
Yeah.
Let's call it for a day.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm stopping the recording.
Yeah.